Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Lore You Know. I'm here with
Good
Sarah.
afternoon,
We're going to talk
everybody.
about orcs and stuff. But, Sarah, do you have a story to tell us first, or is it going to be a later
Yeah,
story?
yeah. I totally. While I was doing some research on the orcs to prepare for today, I did a silly thing. I was going through one of the very earliest Guardlands books because I was like, where was the reference to who made the orcs? And I found another pronunciation guide, and I'm always complaining about how I can't pronounce anything correctly. And I found another pronunciation guide. This is one of the earliest ones because this was the Galspad Gazetteer, which is like the little paperback Galspad book, as opposed to the big hardcover Galspad campaign setting book. So and the Gazetteer was like, I don't think it was the first book, but it was definitely one of the first 3 or 4 books that came out. And it has a pronunciation guide in it. And I think it has probably the first one, because I don't think there was a pronunciation guide in the Creature Collection. And this may have been actually the second book to come out. And it's pronounced Lathine in that book, but in this book, which is the new book, it's Lathina. And I was like, damn it! It's not just me! They changed it! And I'm like, how many other ones did they change? And I'm pronouncing them wrong because they changed it. And the thing is, it's not even because they did change it for the new edition. No, it changed from that Gazetteer to a later one of the original books. I can't blame the new edition for that pronunciation change. But it's like somewhere between 2000 and 2004, they changed how to say that Titan's name. So it's like, anyway. So that was like my little thing that I discovered.
I like Fran's comment. It's a regional dialect thing.
Yeah, regional dialect. It's whether it's I'm from Vash, so it's Lathine, and if you're from Calastia or Shelzar, it's Lathina. Albania. Actually, the Albanian accent's the one we make the most fun of. So go figure. I also got a new camera today, so you'll see my angle is different.
Yay!
Hopefully the quality's a little better. Either that or I spent a lot of money on a camera for no reason.
It's pretty clear, yeah.
So no longer so I'll be looking correctly at it because I've got my 2 monitors here. And
right.
Thing anymore.
So last time we were talking about Mithril, and that just kind of led into the Plains of Lede, which is right there. And so,
which is right there.
Organically speaking, we're going to the Plains of Lede and talking about orcs.
Yeah, and if you look at literally on the map, right underneath the Plains of Lede in Prenz, it's like orc tribes. So there's apparently orc tribes, whatever that means.
Like right there.
Like right there. And the Mithril book, and I don't know if you kept that map this time, but the Mithril book had a map because the Mithril book covered the Plains of Lede, and it has this map showing 3 orc tribes, although they're not in the Plains of Lede specifically. They're more in the Keldar. They're in the North Keldar steppes north of Blood Basin. And they talk about the 2 of the 3 off the top of my head. The Scorched Skull tribe, the Gravel Fist tribe, and the other tribe whose name I've forgotten.
The text is so small.
Text is so small.
Let's see if we can blow it up here. I can blow it up, but it just looks terrible.
I believe it's the Thornhide tribe. We'll go. Other way. Keep going. Like, I'm looking at the Twitch stream, so it's like way ahead.
Oh, gotcha.
Go to the bottom.
Oh, the bottom?
Yeah, you gotta go to the bottom to see it. Yeah. The bottom of the map.
Oh, there they are. Scorched Skull, Thornhide, and Gravel Fist.
And Gravel Fist. And so this was like in the original book. So in the original books, orcs are for the most part villains. And it's consistent with both new and old. They sided with the Titans during the war. So basically anybody who sided with the Titan, no matter who made them, is considered Titan spawn.
Right.
And obviously who sided with the gods are considered the divine races, despite the fact that they weren't necessarily made by a god. Humans, elves, dwarves, they weren't made by the gods. They were all made by the Titans. The Manticora, they were made by a god. The Tritons, they were made by a god. But for the most part, most of the big heavies that fought in the war were not made by the gods. So this whole Titan spawn. How do you define Titan spawn?
Right.
So it's there. I've heard 3 different definitions. Basically, almost everybody on Skarn is Titan spawn because they're made by Titan, or they were deliberately worship Titans and follow them, or they were something that were organically created by a Titan through like inaction and accident. Like the Slytherin, the rat people, because they're very much like, I mean, if anything is a true Titan spawn, it's like, I was a rat and I ate some blood and I turned into a monster. That feels like more Titan spawn than anything. So are humans Titan spawn? Blah blah blah. You can make that argument, and we've made it before. But in a nutshell, the Orcs fit that category because they sided with the Titans during the war. So, and they were considered like the bad guy and the villain, particularly by the humans and various divine races in the region. They came from primarily this kind of northeast corner of Gelspad. Presumably this is where they were made, but they were made so long ago. I think it was more like this is where they gathered, and this is where most of the survivors are post-war, because presumably a lot of people died, and I'm sure a lot of orcs died during the war. They were created, this is the research I had to do, they were created by Gorak, which I was pretty sure about, but I questioned myself, so I did look it up and confirmed that they were created by Gorak, the Titan of Gluttony, which is a kind of odd one, because if you look at it, it's like, are orcs really a gluttony thing? Because a lot of Gorak's creations are more... I assume that's Gorak. I don't know.
That is Gorak. Yeah, that's from.
That's Gorak. Okay, he's just chomping on things. It's probably Gorak. And he's all teeth. He's got these giant teeth, and that's why I had to look it up, because I was like, I wasn't 100% on that one, because it doesn't really fit his MO when you compare it to some of his other creatures.
Right.
But there's creatures of Gorak that feel more like generated organically, like the fatlings and the gauntlings are more like because they were exposed to Gorak's yuck than because they were created by him. Whereas the orcs were created by him as a servitor race. One of the many servitor races, i.e. a race that was made by a Titan in order to be its servants, presumably, of which there are many. Not humans, though. Humans, there's 4 races on Skarn that are called the mystery races, because they don't know for sure which Titan created them, whereas most of them you could just narrow down as this race, it's this race. Humans, elves, dwarves, and halflings are all, we're not sure which Titan made them. Although there's some strong theories for at least the elves and the dwarves that it's probably down to one of these 2 or 3 Titans. You know, but for sure which of those it isn't clear. Like the elves, probably Danev, might have been Rinruk. Rinruk took credit for it, but there's a lot of denial going on there. Don't know. You know, and
that's right. Nobody wants to claim the humans. They're embarrassing.
Well, no, nobody wants to have been made by Rinruk. And dwarves, it was like, was it Thulkas or was it Gulthaga? You know, it would be the god of fire, the god of metalworking. Both of them fit the bill, but it's not clear which one made the dwarves. So and the dwarves were like, we don't even care. we worship Goran. We have nothing to do with the Titans, so we don't care who made us. And then the humans and the halflings are just a big mystery. The only knowledge there we know is that the halflings were created by some Titan based on the humans, but which Titan did it?
Yeah.
But anyway, orcs.
Oh yeah, that's why we're here today. Right.
Orcs were made by Gorak. Why, it's not clear, other than he wanted some pretty badass servants. When you think about the origin of orcs in kind of I want to say it, high fantasy mythology sense,
mm-hmm.
You know, like elves and dwarves, in terms of when you think of high fantasy D&D, they're the Tolkienian mythology races. So orcs fit that Tolkien myth, which was, back in Tolkien day, was one of the evil uber gods. Not Sauron, Morgoth, whatever. He made he captured a bunch of elves and turned them into orcs, basically, and created the orcs out of them. So, are the orcs of Skarn because Gorak took a bunch of elves and swooshed them and made orcs? I don't know. Or did he make them out of something new? I don't know. It doesn't matter. The orcs certainly don't claim to have any connection to the elves, and there's no evidence of that. And the elves certainly claim a connection to Fae, which is like another whole precursor race, which may or may not have been made by Titans, or may have already been naturally on Skarn, who the hell knows. So I don't think Skarn claims any connection between orcs and elves like there is in Tolkienian mythology and whatnot. So, I'm going all over the place here. This is a tough one because I don't have as keen of a I haven't done as much with the orcs as I have with other races. I admit that. So, cursor on that one. So the original book said, okay, there's 3 tribes of orcs, and they're in the Keldar Steppes and north into the Plains of Lede, and that's where they are. But then the map shows these 3 tribes clearly in the northern Keldar Steppes and not really going into the Plains of Lede, and they name them. And presumably these are the 3 tribes you as a PC or a GM would interact with the most. And the Scorched Skull and the Thorn Hive are evil. I put that in air quotes. And the Gravel Fist are neutral. And note the Gravel Fist are really tiny in this regard and surrounded by the other 2 tribes. And they're clearly like the other 2 tribes worship the Titans. They're involved in all sorts of nefarious stuff. Some of them are working for the Penumbra Lords. Some of them are just doing other kind of not good things with and rampaging across the steppes and making life difficult for everyone else. And then the Gravel Fist are like, we worship Denev, and we're not so evil. We're not, we're neutral, and we like the land, and we just want to be farmers. But we're surrounded by a bunch of raving warlords and blah.
Right.
So, and then as a PC, based on the old 3X setting, you could play a half orc, which would be like, child of an orc and a human, or some descendant of half orcs, and you would be on whatever alignment you wanted, and you could be anywhere on Skarn, but generally you're some descendant of the Orcs of Lede and of one of these warlord barbarian lineages, or if you're lucky, a farmer Denev follower. Sounds like that. Those were your choices back then. It's like, okay, I could either be like a rampaging warlord descendant or a weird neutral farmer descendant. And what the heck is a farmer?
And one of those
orc?
makes for a better adventurer. I don't know which.
Yeah. So you're probably going to be the rampaging warlord descendant who wants to be like this bland neutral orc. Although I had a lot of fun with the Gravel Fist, and where the meta plot was heading and implied was that there was inevitably going to be some kind of civil war amongst these different tribes of orcs. And of course I ran that in my campaign because I ran everything in my campaign. So like I had the whole civil war thing, and the Gravel Fist kind of come out on top because they get help because the PCs come in and help them out and build up alliances between them and various other interested parties like the Vigilance of Vesh and the Mithril Knights, because they have a vested interest in not having rampaging orc tribes running around the area. So they're like, we'll help the neutral orcs and convince them that yes. And then there was another push to be like, hey, could the Scorched Skull orcs maybe instead of worshipping Gorak, worship Vangal? Because at least he's a god. And so there was like this push of like, let's send some missionaries for Vangal, and then other people were like, is that really a good idea? It's like they're still gonna rampage and kill other people, but at least they'll be doing it on behalf of the gods instead of.
But now they can have clerics. Wait, that's
yes,
bad.
Exactly. It's like, do we really want orcs with clerics? So there was that like thing. So in 3X, that was basically what was going on, and pretty much orcs were the bad guys, or at best the neutral guys that you sort of allied with against the bad guys. A very, very Skarn kind of thing to do, in my opinion. Then in 5e, which I presume as a way to differentiate Guardlands from other 5e settings. They said, we're going to let you play an orc. We're going to
Yeah.
figure out what the rules are to let you play. Instead of playing a half orc, you can play a full orc. And it was like, well, what does that look like?
Yeah.
And they created a new setting north of kind of where all this takes place, in the middle of the Plains of Lede, called True Drogna, which is a honest to God city of orcs, primarily orcs. And they worshipped Dennev. And lo and behold, when I saw who the leader was, my little mind was blown, because it's Doningar, the leader of the Gravelfist tribe. My winner in the Orc Civil War won. And I joke when I say that, like, 5e Skarn looks like where Scarland's meta plots were heading in AV 160, and sort of rolled them all back to AV 150. And this is another example of that, a really heavy one in my book, because this is literally where my plot went. Like, when I ran the Orc Civil War, Doningar came in on top. He became like a warlord, war chief over a combined group of Gravelfist and Scorchskull. They basically would beat the Thornhide out, and the Gravelfist took over, and they became like this combination Dennev worshipping, Vangal worshipping bunch of orcs with a capital city. Of course, I didn't give it a name, but I had very similar thing happen. So I think it was just really a logical progression of where it was going. It's like, if I was going that same direction, based on reading the meta plot, I didn't wholeheartedly come up with it. It was based on where I could see things were logically going. And then they went there. I was just like, that it did. I thought it made sense, and they apparently thought it made sense too, because they did this. Yeah. So it can be. It's a great location to be like the home of where your orc character came from, if you want to play an orc. And where orcs would be kind of central in sort of a capital area. Putting it further north, though, does get it puts it more into the Plains of Lede and out of that heavy Keldar Steppes area. I mean, and you can tell on the map, because it's like where all the bumpy mountains are the Keldar Steppes, and then the Plains of Lede is the flat thing. And it's kind of right on the north end of that river. And it makes sense to be near the river, because cities need water. So it's kind of in the middle, and that's fine. It's like, apparently, as part of whatever it was, the Gravelfist got more territory, or, I mean, did that history even happen? I don't know, and run it however you will. But in the end, Doningar Bulls, they did shift his alignment from neutral to lawful neutral, which I thought was interesting, because I don't think of orcs as being lawful, really. Because all the other orcs were kind of chaotic, or chaotic neutral, or chaotic evil.
I mean, it kind of makes sense, because when you read about To Drogna, the Klingon city.
Yeah. The Klingon city, yeah.
It really is the first post-war orc city that they managed to keep together, and I feel like his alignment almost had to shift in order to. He had to be like, this has to be the direction we go if we want the civilization.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I have no problem Doningar being lawful neutral. I thought it was interesting, because it's like, oh, they shifted a lot. They actually shifted a lot of alignments when you look at this.
And that's something that, if you're a player or you're a DM, you should let your players shift alignment as they play. This is just my personal take on it.
Because, unless you're playing like a paladin, yeah.
Right. Or, I mean, you could be a paladin and choose to not be a paladin anymore, and stop being your alignment that you need to be. But I feel like it's such this stringent, you have to stay, and it doesn't. And this is a great example, because this is a life reason why Doningar made sense to change his alignment.
Yeah.
Like it's how he's now living his life.
He has to be, yeah.
I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, it's a good soapbox. I mean, I've had some of the best moments in D&D games when a character changed their alignment. I remember a classic moment in a game where somebody was playing neutral alignment, and we were at this like location, and you had to be good to go through this magical portal.
Yeah.
And he was trapped outside. He literally couldn't go in. And he's like, he found like, and I mean, part of it was like, he wanted to be like, I want to go in to join the party to do the plot, but it was also like, I have a character motivation to change to neutral good, and and here it is, and and spelling it all out and everything like that. So it was because honestly, people change. I mean,
Yeah.
as your character grows, I think alignment changing should happen, and it is when you're playing a paladin and you obey those paladin oaths. And I say paladins don't. In 5th edition, a paladin can be any alignment, but your restriction isn't your alignment. Your restriction is your oaths. So a lot of the oaths kind of require an alignment, because when you read them, you're like, this is lawful good, or this is chaotic good, or whatever. So that's what I mean when I say that they're kind of there. Oh, Fran commented at Brunel of Valor that, yeah, her druid incarnate, she played a druid incarnate character who needed to be true neutral for a giant pile of reasons. This is Jervis, and actually character is in Wise and the Wicked.
Nice.
And if you look up the character, his alignment's neutral good, not true neutral. Because Fran couldn't play it any other way. Honestly. It's like this character, but must constantly make those decisions while instinctively at his core is neutral good, has to play that true neutral, because he has to balance, because he's a god of all, or a cleric of all of the gods, so he has to play that neutral place, mostly so as not to piss off the evil gods, but it's like, I can't favor Madriel over Belsmith, I must be neutral. So yeah, that's another example. Oh, not Jervis, your other character. Sorry, love. Who are you talking about, Jervis? She was talking about her other druid. Yeah, I forgot druid. Jervis wasn't a druid. Jervis was cleric. But anyway, I'm going off the rails. I can't. I have to not look at the comments in Twitch because they will distract me. To not do that. Anywho,
It's true. She says either way, Skarn's great for role playing. It's true.
Yeah, yes, this is very true. I'll talk about on some other occasion, dear.
We should just have like a group powwow sometime, like not an official lore, but these are our characters, and this is like all the crazy shit we've done.
Well, then I would just talk about Vigilant. I mean, I would just talk about my novel,
which is fine
because I'm the GM. I never get to play Scarred Lands. I mean, I'm now in my first. I am now playing in the first Scarred Lands game I've ever actually played. I'm always
Travis's
running
game is my first game to play in as well. It's pretty fun.
I'm always running it. So, True Drogna, the Orc capital.
Yeah.
In the Plains of Lede, the middle of the Plains of Lede, they claim. So a bunch of orcs banded together. Eventually, this like little settlement becomes a full-on city over the years, and mostly just out of a sense of joint protection and self-preservation. And they've added some interesting stuff to it that I found kind of telling. Like, they allied with of all things, I want to make sure I get it right, the Chardonnay. It's like they're the creepiest lawful evil people in Gelspad. They're my little joke about like North Korea. They're the isolated country on the other side of the Wall of Bones, former goblin lands that have become dark dwarf Chardon worshippers, slave pits, and nasty everything. And they've allied themselves with the orcs of the Plains of Lede, which again, this also goes into Donengar being lawful, because they're lawful, but traditionally, when you think of orcs, you think of Vangal followers, not Chardon followers.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting new addition. I was like, okay, I can't. I mean, I will say this: the followers of Chardon probably have the most missionaries of any god on Skarn, and certainly in Gelspad. So it would not surprise me that they showed up going, "You want to learn the ways of Chardon? We will teach you." because
No, I
they
don't.
do that
Yes,
all
you
over the
do.
continent. Yes, you do, and we will build a temple, and we will give you money. And they go, oh, money, okay, we
Oh,
can
okay,
build a temple.
yes.
Um, and there you go. I mean, they built a temple in Shelzar. I mean, Shelzar. I mean, it's like the Chartered missionaries are everywhere. You just beat them off with sticks. Um, just everywhere. So that's a thing. And then the other thing that I found, the two other things I found super interesting, um, they talk about catacombs, which is very consistent with one of the mithril plots, which is the idea that there's all these catacombs, and not really catacombs, but all these underground passages is named complex. It's too complicated to be a catacomb or a passage. It's an underground complex made by the Thracians that
Right.
covers the entire plains of Lede, so it would make sense that this city would have some entrance into that, um, or into something that could lead to that more likely, because that was all like weird, um, dimensional portal stuff. So who knows how that even would work? But so there's a lot of plot happening there. Um, and then another thing that they added that I found really cool that I don't remember being in the old orc lore, so I'm pretty sure this is new to 5e, which is um, the idea of celestial tattoos.
Mm-hmm.
So tattoos are a big deal on Skarn. Like tattoo magic is huge. It always has been. That was one of the big draws of Scarlands back in the beginning. Very first Relics and Rituals book is like, here's how to do tattoo magic, and we've got a whole chapter on it, and it was a big deal. And like a ton of races just get tattoos by default, and getting magical tattoos, and they have a whole rule set for that. And they're even more prolific than your basic magic items. It's like, yeah, I've got a magic tattoo. Look at me, I can do a thing. So there's all that stuff. So giving orcs tattoos, that was kind of an obvious. But and I've pretty much always had them. But then they made them these specifically star astrology
Right.
tattoos, which is kind of cool. I thought that was really neat. The idea of like, instead of like tattooing like, the blood of my enemies and the things I conquered or whatever, they're like, for each success in their life and each conquest, they would like add stars to their personal constellations and
Right.
stuff, which was really neat. So it's like, I'm completing my wolf thing, and then I can complete my bear thing or whatever. I don't know what they'll pick, but that concept of creating the kind of their own star charts,
Yeah. I thought it was also
of your
interesting because
body.
they do like so like it's like a black star or like a non-colored
Yeah, I was
star
gonna
if
get into
it's a
that.
success. Oh,
Oh, no, no, go ahead, go ahead. You think you got this better than I do?
I
Orc
just
star.
thought it was cool that like they also record their failures because they're
Yeah.
also learning experiences, and so they record them so they learn from them, and it's like always like a red, I think, star in their constellation, which it's like showcasing, like unless you're hiding your tattoo, but like you're essentially like owning it. You're just like,
Yeah.
this is where I fucked up, and everyone gets to see it. I just thought that was like such a great concept for the orcs. Like
Yeah, yeah.
humans wouldn't do that. They're like, I'm shamed by this, and I hide it down deep inside. And orcs
I'm
are
a
like,
human,
fuck
but
that.
yeah, as a rule, yeah. Some people walk around showing off their failures, but yeah, in a general sense, certainly. And I like that. I like that whole idea. Um, my only critique was that there was this implication that they were seeing that, well, their talk about having interest in the zodiac, and having astronomy and astronomers there, which is interesting, because you think about like the astronomers in terms of like lore masters and spellcasters who can do uh, zodiac slash astrology, more astrology than astronomy, but astrology based magic would be
Hmm.
the diviners in the phylacteric vault. There's a whole
Right.
school for that. Um, but and the orcs aren't known to being wizards. They're not
Yeah.
known for that. So it's like, okay, I mean, you could have orc shamans, sure, and that would map. But having orcs with a strong interest in astrology, let me get it right, because it's really more astrology than
Yeah.
astronomy. But having Orcs interested in astrology and mapping those constellations and the zodiac on them is really cool. But then they talk about finding other constellations that aren't in known, that aren't talked about, and that made me go, what?
Yeah.
No.
And they
Because
don't really clarify in the book whether it's like, do they see other stars? Except for one. There is one
yeah,
that they say that they literally can see differently. Or are they just like
yeah,
interpreting? Are they like, that's
yeah,
not a crab. That's obviously a longsword. Or, whatever.
yeah. But you can literally go there and meet the crab. So it's like, no, it's a crab.
Yeah.
Because you can go chatsies with them. There actually, I don't think is there a crab? I believe you. But like, or the
We'll say
bear
the bear.
or
Ursos. That's
tower or
obviously a
anyway.
bear.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, if you're Ursos, you can chat with Ursos. You can go there. You can be like, "Hey, it's a bear." So the constellation's obviously a bear. So with do the Orcs interpret it differently, and what does that mean? And how does that work? So, and the way I look at it though, and because I had to kind of reason this out of my own head because I was just like, no, you can't add more zodiac. Hadrada made 16. It's even and balanced and blah. Like, what do you mean? But then I was just like, okay, think about it. You've got these really uber powerful entities running around Skarn. You've got Yugman, you've got Queen Ran, you've got these epic level people running around who aren't gods but who are super powerful, and you've got PCs who could become super powerful, and you've got all these other, the Jinn and just all these other entities. Any number of which could be like, I'm gonna make my own demi-plane. And presumably making a zodiac plane wouldn't be that hard. So I can easily picture some Queen Rand going, I'm going to make my own zodiac
Right.
demi plane because I'm like that. and goes and gets some uber magic and sticks her own weird stars in the sky and is like, this is mine and I'm going to put it, between these two back in that corner. and suddenly there's 6 new stars in the sky that
Right.
Queen Rand stuck up there, or
Huh?
whoever. Whatever uber. So could there be more than 16 zodiac, but they're not official? They're not part of the calendar?
Right.
Totally. Totally. This is a very plausible thing. Because making a demi-plane when you're level 30 isn't that hard.
Right.
When you're level 30 or whatever the equivalent 5e would be. So, because I actually remember epic level rules around creating a demi-plane in 3.5. Like, we made one. My uber demigod party in a Canadian game, we made a demi-plane. So if we could make a demi-plane, Queen Rand could make her freaking demi-plane. Or whoever. pick your uber being.
Right.
Duckman. Or some Jin Lord. I don't know. There's a dozen other uber beings out there. Or some demigod, or like Arios is like, I'm gonna have a dream thing with stars. So that could have happened, and the Orcs could have looked up and went with their orcish telescopes and went, do you see those new stars in the sky? I wonder where that goes, and study it. And I could also imagine the phylacteric vault going, what's that? Oh dear. Made that one. And getting like all upset about that because they like things organized. And does that muck up with their astrological charts and their divination magic? And oh geez, there's a new constellation. Does that screw up when we're in Astora? I don't know. Is that
Right.
Virgo? What would it be? So plots galore right in there that could happen, and that I don't think goes against that whole business of how many constellations there are and whatnot. But yeah, they do talk about the actual text is section of the city is yet to be its constellations is unknown except by orcs who claim to see a dark star at its center. Yeah, that's, and I don't know what that means, like a black hole.
Oh. Huh.
Now,
Huh.
going into my theory that Scarred Lands is separated from the rest of the multiverse,
Right.
there wouldn't be room for a black hole, but they could be perceiving the kind of twist that keeps the Scarred Lands' own personal mega oubliette demi-plane separate. Like I've described it as sort of a balloon with a knot.
Right.
They could be seeing that and seeing that as their dark star.
Yeah.
Could be seeing that
And
aspect.
this dark star
And
thing was
sky.
introduced this in 5th edition, right?
It's in 5th edition,
I don't recall seeing it before, but I mean, there's so much lore. It's really easy to forget little things like that.
So much lore. Like, I consider myself a lore master, and I maybe know half of it. There is so much here. Every time I like, when I was just doing the research to find out, which Titan made the Orcs, and I was just like, oh yeah, I remember reading this. Oh, I totally forgot all this. It's like, oh, that's right. This whole thing was a thing. Just there's just so much lore, and it I don't know how anybody can keep it straight. We've made our calendar and our timeline, and we want to work on the wiki because the wiki is sad and empty. So Fran's been working on the wiki, but
Nice.
there's just so much. There's just so
Yeah.
much stuff. It's outrageously expansive. So, was this Dark Star thing mentioned? Well, I need more searchable PDFs to actually go through the 35 other books and find out.
Right? I think it's a new thing, and I'm curious if they
I'm pretty sure.
have a meta plot that they're aiming that towards. Like, one of these days, this is going to show up, or if they're just like, here's a stake for the DMs. Here,
It's
follow
stick
this
to the
trail.
I can guarantee you it's stick to the DMs. Like, if like a lot of the people who were creatives on the SLPG aren't working on the property anymore, so I can tell you that. I mean, I can confer with Travis too, but I don't think he had anything to do with this. I know he didn't have anything to do with this, so I would say I would definitely say it's a stake in the ground for the DM at this point. I don't think there was a plan for whatever the heck this thing was. It could have been one of the creatives behind it going, I'm gonna throw in a black hole or something like that, but because they certainly weren't thinking along my lines of Scarred Land's been isolated because of the moon and everything. But because I don't think that has occurred to that many people, because they haven't put as much, I wouldn't say put as much thought into it as put as much thought in that specific direction into it like we have. They've put their thoughts into different directions that interested them,
Totally.
less about cosmology and more about culture, probably, or more about rule systems, or whatever they're thinking. Everybody's thinking something different. But the upshot of this is Orcs playable race, and that was the intent behind it, to make Scarred Lands 5e different than the other 5es by making Orcs a playable race, and this is how you can do it. And a lot of it was upscaling all of the playable races, so that having an orc with having a class that has, or a race that has this massive bonus to strength wouldn't be so off when you also gave elves 6 more abilities and dwarves 6 more abilities and humans nothing more because they were already broken. Well, no, seriously, think about this. When you look at every other 5e system, most people play humans because they're stronger than any other race, because they get a +1 every freaking stat. Scarred Lands, nobody plays humans. Everybody plays every other race because they're so much stronger, because they've overbalanced them. So it's like, the only reason to play a non-human in the other game settings is because you want a specific shtick for a specific class. Like, I want to play a halfling rogue because halflings get these super cool hide bonuses. Or I want to play an elven wizard because it's the only way I can get this background to do like some weird funky thing. Or I want to be Dritz, so I'm going to be a freaking drow,
Or I want to see in the dark, so I'm going to play almost every race except for humans.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, just get those goggles, man. But like, if you're a true min-maxer, you're probably going to play a human because they have so much other benefit. Where Scarred Lands, it's like, who would want to play a human because all the other races are beefed up? And Orc is definitely over the top of that pile. It was another little thing I wanted to throw out there. So when we were writing Vigilant, it was when this book was coming out, the Scarred Lands Player Guide, and it's before anything else, before Travis was brought in, before any of the Yugman stuff was even considered, before any of that stuff was thought about. So we were just basing on this material. And there was this kind of gap of about a year between a year or two, I think, when Player Guide was in production and coming out, and this is all because Stu Weich's fortunate passing, and then Onyx Path taking over from Nocturnal Media. But there was a big gap where nothing new. Scarred Lands, it was like 3 new books and then nothing for a good year and a half. And Vigilant came out during that period, and then we had the gap, and then the new stuff. Bloodsea came out, and then we've had a book every month now. But we had that gap where nothing came out, and everything was pushing the Scarred Land Player Guide. We went into final reviews of Vigilant, and Scott, the previous line lead. God, I'm looking up his name. Sorry, Scott, can't remember your last name. Holden. So he was the main developer on this book. Scott Holden reviewed Vigilant, loved it, but was like, "You can't have any half race." And we're like, "What?" And he's like, "No half orcs, no half elves." And I was like, "Okay, that's going to be complicated because I've got some critical plot background stuff around the specific character who's a half orc and the specific character who's a half elf, and then their whole thing." And he's like, "Well, you can keep those two. They're fine. They've got a heavy plot. They can be the exception to the rule, but all the other ones you have to take out." And I was like, "Okay, those are all known NPCs from modules. We didn't invent anything."
Right.
There was like all these okay, the maid in the home command capital, the building, whatever it is, their version of the White House. The maid is a half elf. She's shown as like an NPC in the module. She's a half elf, and it's like, guess she's an elf now. If a maid who's an elf, okay. Because I was like, I'm not gonna make her human. It's too many humans, and there was a bunch of other ones. We had to change them all to pure, and we were like, okay, I'm fine with that. If you're fine with me changing canon characters from half to full, I'm fine doing it. So we did, and kept just our 2 funky characters because they had interesting, complicated backgrounds. And it was the emphasis was so that to say, not that half breeds don't exist on Skarn, but that they're kind of rare. And mostly to encourage people to say, hey, you can play full orc now. So
Right.
There are half orcs, but they're not that many. You can play full orc. And then, of course, this year, Youngman comes out. Youngman's Guide to Skarn comes out. And it's like, here's rules for playing half elf anything and half orc anything. So you can be a half elf Manticora or a half orc Triton or whatever you want. And it's like, because when you think about it, if racial breeding is possible,
right,
and in Scarred Land canon, at least elves and humans is recorded. If it's possible, then you would think that the whole planet would just be covered in half breeds by this point. But because if you can do it, you will.
Yeah, it's true. Like, this is completely derailing. Different world, completely. But our the world that I've been building, there is a highly powerful NPC in there that pretty much his whole thing when he was younger was to go around and check off things on his list, and he has all of these kids running around that are not purebred whatsoever. Like, people are gonna get busy.
People gonna get busy, yeah. Literally quoting Ronald and Valerie. Right. And that's yeah, and so you question, like, why isn't Scarred Land covered in all these half breeds? I can headcanon that, but there's nothing official. But it could be like a result of the war made it possible, like some kind of, Titan fallout.
Right.
Like, made it possible that races that couldn't interbreed can now because, I don't know, Mesos died or
and it could even be that like, maybe they always have been able to, but the mortality rate is really high, so a half orc child may not make it, but the ones that do are your adventurers. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, in the old canon, like there were huge settlements of half orcs, so it's just really weird to be like, okay, they don't exist anymore.
Yeah, that's the other thing I want to go into, is because there were these huge settlements of half orcs. They're described in depth extensively of when you look at populations of different locations, like Mullis Town, for example, great example. And in the old books, it would be like, 40% human, 30% elf. You have all these percentages of different
Right.
races, 5% half, and there'd be like X% half orc, not orc, half orc, which is an implication of that half orcs came in and bred with other half orcs to make more half orcs and not humans or orcs. Because presumably if you breed two half orcs together, you just end up with another half orc, not with a human or an orc. I don't know why. You'd think 1/4 would be human and 1/4.
Yeah, if you actually use genetics, you might end
up. Or pick some combination thereof. But yeah, whatever. I'm going with simpler genetics than would actually exist, and there's so much magic involved. Is genetics even a thing in D&D?
Right. Yeah, magic is the radiation that completely fucks genetics.
Yes, totally. This is how we get black roses in Animal Crossing. Through magic.
Radiation.
I went way out there. Totally other topic. I won't go any further into that one. But yeah. So how do you get? So what is up with suddenly you can have or half orc, half anything, or half elf, half anything. And I love that they've introduced these rules, because frankly it's fun, and who hasn't always wanted to play a 12 or an
right. Yeah, that's always been one of my big beefs, is just like, why is it always humans?
Yeah. Why is it always humans? Like, no, I want to be a half elf.
Humans aren't the only people that will sleep with anything.
Well, we will, but yes.
Right. But we're not the only ones, damn it.
But we don't know either. We don't know either, and that's the thing of interest. And I mean, in Scarred Lands, it did come down to the Forsaken Elves, and this was the whole origin of the half elves. Was supposed to be the Forsaken Elves couldn't have kids with other elves, so they started getting on with humans, have kids because they were otherwise infertile.
Right.
And their race was doomed to die, and so they started doing it with humans, with or without their consent. And so you have all these, and that explains why you'd have this rampant population of half elves running around.
Yeah.
They don't have as good of an explanation as to why you have these rampant half orcs running around, other than there's like large populations of them. So it's like, okay. But in the 5th edition books, they erased that. So if you look at the description of Mullis Town, it no longer has 25% half orc, and that didn't seem as big of a deal to me until it got to the heteronomy of Verduk. It stung me as a new change, because I really like the dichotomy of what they did there. The heteronomy of Verduk, and it's like the worst name of a country ever. Okay, not ever, but it's certainly up there, and certainly probably the worst country of anywhere in Gelsbad, because it's like the egotistical Emperor of Calastia decided to name a country after himself. It's this sort of can you pop up? I don't know if you grab the map of this, but in the Calastian Empire, so you've got 5 other countries in the Calastian hegemony, and this is like the 6th in the northwest corner of the hegemony. And it's you can't even, it's so tiny you can't see. You see the word Verduk in big letters, and over that it says the heteronomy.
Yeah.
And I always get heteronomy and hegemony mixed up.
Totally.
The empire is the hegemony. The country is the now I can't say it. Heteronomy. Yeah. So north of Zikitsk and west of Nuvenir is the country of Verduk, basically. And this became like it's right on the southern border of one of the nastiest places in Galspad of the blood of the Hornsaw Forest, and close to the border of the Blood Steppes. So it's got two just nasty borders there, and then across the river, got some other nasty areas if you go just a little bit further. So it's not a pleasant, as the Empire goes, it's one of the more dangerous locations. So the story goes that all these halflings used to live in the Haggard Hills to the north, which wasn't the Haggard Hills at the time, were refugees when the Haggard Hills were devastated and needed a new place to live, and they all ended up moving here. So there was all these halfling refugees, and Verdok was like, "You can live in this brand new country that I've set up for you, and welcome," because he, halfling's useful, and so he put up a home for them, and you just got to obey me and follow my empire and all that. So he set this up aside for them, but then it proved to be, as I said, really dangerous because you're right on the border of the Hornsaw Forest and the Blood Steppes. So he also brought in all of these half-orcs. And I loved the dichotomy of this, of like, you've got these 6-foot-plus half-orcs hanging out with these 2.5, 3-foot halflings as the two major populations of this country. And they kind of don't get along because they're so different from each other, and they have such different values and motives and everything that like it just created this interesting balance. And are they going to get along, or are they going to have like some kind of conflict? And it was just, I thought it was really interesting. And then with sort of the erasure the right term, of half orcs in the 5e setting, they replaced the half orcs with the Ratmen, with Slytherin. And the idea that there's all these redeemed Slytherin refugees coming in from the swamp areas, the Morning Marshes, and all that region. Sopiatra Swamp, I can't even pronounce that one. They came south because they weren't going to go to Vesh, because Vesh was like, nope. So they came south, and and Verdok is like, you can live in this country, and so they kind of replaced that whole halfling thing with Ratman halfling thing, which I thought was a good replacement, but it kind of did break that. Not to say that Slytherin and halflings don't have as much differences as half-orcs and halflings did, but I have mixed feelings about that.
Yeah,
Does that make sense? Yeah, it still maps as kind of creating this weird society of two really different races trying to build a community together. But I feel that the Ratmen are more desperate than the half-orcs are, because the half-orcs are just like, we're mean. And the Ratmen are more like, we just don't want to die. Right? Please don't kill us. And they're definitely, redeemed Ratmen definitely have more of a desperation to them, I think, than half-orcs do. So I think that changes that culture of that country. Not necessarily in a bad way, but certainly if you were doing something specifically with that plot point, it would be hard to transition that into 5e. But now there's rules for half-orcs, so you can just put the half-orcs back in your campaign if you wanted it, and change it over, or make it be 3 races or whatever. I don't know. But it's like half-orcs and Slytherin and halflings are all there with like 7 humans going, what the hell is it with this country?
I personally think it'd be really entertaining, because you have these half-orcs that are like, and all of a sudden all of these Slytherin commanders are just like, I don't want to die, and the half-orcs are like, well then don't. How hard is this?
Oh dude, I do adore the idea of a nation of a bunch of half-orcs being buddies with a bunch of Ratmen and just like hanging out, because there's certainly a lot of similarities, I think, there. Well, certainly more than the halflings. So that's the shit for the halflings, but I would also say that halflings on Skarn just get dumped on more than any other race. Sucks to be a halfling on Skarn. I mean, I guess it's better to be a halfling than a goblin, but
yeah.
But not only so much, because there's more of them. But anyway, so they did make that significant change. Um, but on the flip side, despite making that change, while in the old 3X version, you pretty much only found full orcs in that Kaldar Steppes Plains of Lede area. Now you can find full orcs all over Gelspad and
Right.
presumably all over Skarn, but definitely all over Gelspad. So they're way more prolific. You find them anywhere. And whereas before, if you went to Shelzar or Darakeen or Yvesh, you wouldn't find orcs. You just
Right.
wouldn't. You'd find half orcs, but you wouldn't find orcs. Oh, they've basically been replaced, so you would find orcs. And they're not. And while there's certainly inherent racism in Skarn, that's just, I think, well, depending on how your GM and group plays it, could become across as really heavy, because there's this implied, like, are you Titan spawn or redeemed?
Right.
So all of the quote redeemed races, those new redeemed playable races, the orcs, the ratmen, the snake men, the horsemen, I'm probably missing some, but to play one, if you go into any of these human and or elf based populations, there's
Right.
or dwarf based populations even, there's this automatic suspicion, Titan spawn, that you're a Titan worshiper, that you're
Right.
evil, that you sided on the wrong side of the war.
Right. It's definitely more of I mean, it is a race thing, because as a race, the orcs chose this side.
Yeah.
That's not saying that there weren't orcs that were fighting for, like, the gods, but they were
The
definitely
3X
the
version
minority.
says there were no orcs fighting on the side of the gods. The 5e, you can have orcs fighting on the side of the gods, but the old version, that was the
I feel like blanket statements like that are really left open for interpretation, because, I mean, there's no reason an orc couldn't. Like, it's not like they were controlled racially as to, but it's definitely a thing of the sins of the father, because most of these people were not alive for the Divine War. Like, orcs don't live 150 years, so the orcs are definitely suffering from.
They're elves.
Right, they're suffering from the case of their ancestors made these choices, and now they have to deal with it, and it sucks, and it could be viewed very easily as racism, because to an extent it is, but it isn't like, I don't like you because you're an orc, I don't like you because you were the enemy at one time.
Yeah. I find, I mean, I've played around a lot with the kind of inherent racism in Scarlet. I do admit that. I completely admit that. I mean, and it came of specifically of doing so much with the country of Vesh, and with what happened with the new stuff. And I think next time we're gonna have to talk about Slytherin, because this really leads right into that. But that edge of they in the Serpent Fora, there's a character who's described as, when she was a kid, they used to play Vigilance and Orcs, like Cowboys and Indians. And and it's like, oh, there's racism right there. And so it's like, you played Vigilance and Orcs, so the Vigilance are clearly the good guys, and that makes the Orcs the bad guys. Now, okay, 150 years ago we fought against them in a war, so that makes sense. But is that still a thing now? And yet, as kids, you're playing this game,
right?
And is it a racist game when we were kids? Or I don't think generations do anymore, but at least certainly when I was a kid back in the 70s, they played Cowboys and Indians, and certainly prior to that, and it was clearly racist. So we didn't know anything because we were stupid kids. And you could say the same thing, Veshans, stupid kids playing Vigilance and Orcs.
Yeah.
So is that, if you continue with that trend, and we certainly did in Vigilant, of this inherentness that Veshans are racist, is they're the neutral good egalitarian nation. They're supposed to be, like, as a country, not as a city-state. There's some clearly city-states are kind of gooder than Vesh, but as a nation, as a country, well, like Mithril is sort of gooder, and Gleaming Valley is like the ultimate of goodness, but they're city-states. They're not really a whole country. So as a country, in terms of mass and population and geography, and they're a pretty big country because they go all the way up into the Keldar Steppes. They're supposed to be just the good guys compared to the Calastians, who are supposed to be the bad guys, and yet Calastians aren't racist. The Calastians
Right?
welcome the half-orcs, welcome the halflings, welcome the Slytherin, and you've got the Veshans who are actively at war with the Slytherin and the orcs. It's like, well, good job there being the egalitarian good guys. It's like,
Right.
yeah, you know, and that's that. I think that makes Vesh really interesting.
Yeah.
That like, yeah, we're a democracy and everything. Yeah, but we kind of hate rat people, and we kind of hate orcs. And you will
I feel
never
like it's
find
one of those.
yeah.
It's one of those situations where that is like, it's not even like barely hidden racism. They are just not viewing orcs and Slytherin as people.
As people,
Yeah.
they don't see them as people.
Yeah.
And if you're playing a vigilant who's an orc or a Slytherin, you're the first one, because they don't view them as people. And I love this. I mean it's horrible, don't get me wrong, and it's saying and if you're like, no, I don't want any racism in my campaign, then don't play with
Right.
this.
Totally.
But yeah, totally. I'm not saying go there, but I think it's interesting as a dynamic and as a reflection of, I don't know, United States of America maybe, of just an interesting thing of orcs are green.
It's true.
But,
it is interesting, the new description. So the new description is like, they are essentially, they have the same skin tones as humans, but they're all tinted green to some extent.
They're all tinted green. Yeah. So,
It like the old days, it was just like they're fucking green. And now they're like they're like peachy to dark brown green.
But green. I love it. But it's like, but when you look at Lord of the Rings, with the Tolkien origin, the Uruk-hai were black, and
yeah.
I don't know what the goblins and everything, but in Scarred Lands they're green. They're universally green, and the Ratmen come in a variety of different colors, but there's some shade of green. So I think that's fun. That it's like, are they meant to be a parallel to a human ethnicity? No. I mean, the closest thing would be Klingon. Which is alien.
Yeah, especially in Scarred Lands, I feel like they definitely lean towards Klingon as far as their language goes.
Yeah.
They're just like, leave it. I mean,
yeah.
It's not up on the screen right now, but to Drogna, whatever that is.
To Drogna, yeah, it's like they're freaking Klingon. Yeah,
there it is.
They
to
feel
Drogna.
Yeah, but we have also made a important point in Scarred Lands, and I say we in both the official and in the fan community, of really pushing away from making any culture, any country or nation or whatever, a one-to-one parallel with anywhere on Earth. So you can't say that Shelzar is like Arabia, because it's not meant to be. So you can say climate-wise, you can certainly say they dress in robes because it's hot, and people
of all of the places in the world in Scarn, I think Shelzar is the like closest that you can be like, this is mostly Arabian inspired, but everything else has its like own flavor.
Yeah,
like they didn't.
Yeah,
Forgotten Realms is blatantly like Karatur is. They just took everything that was Asia, like Oriental inspired, flavored, and mushed it into Karatur, whereas they don't really do that with Scarred Lands. For the most part.
I mean, it's easy as a GM to say, oh, the Plains of Lede and the Orcs are like Mongols or like Mongolia because they run on horses and all of this business. But it's not meant to be Mongolia. It's not meant to be that culture, certainly. But it's easy as GMs to go there because you want to give your players the sense of something they can comparative, so they can
Right.
picture in their head.
Yeah, some people can't. Some
And
people just can't. Like, they need that
yeah,
real world
yeah,
reference.
yeah. So it's certainly instinctive to give it some kind of real world reference, but we are trying to stay away from that, just to stay away from the cliches and any cultural appropriation involved,
Right.
um, as much as we can. But yeah, there is that kind of falling there to go, but you also want to be able to compare it with something that you're familiar
Right.
with. So they ride horses like in other plain steppe places
Yeah. Yeah.
where there's wide open places and it makes sense to ride a horse. Whether that's any one of a number of horseback faring cultures on Earth. Um, yes, they do that. So anyway, I've gone way off in the weeds because I didn't have like an agenda or anything. One thing I want to also mention for like saying we're done with the Plains of Leeds, Plains of Lede. In addition to the orcs living there, there's a bunch of other nasty races
Yeah.
that make it their home. We have the horsemen of Vangal, who make life difficult for pretty much everybody, including the orcs. They were somewhat allied with the old Scorchskull tribe, I think, or one of those two tribes. Might have been the Thornhide, I don't remember which one, but one of those two. But they're for the most part a bunch of predominantly human, marauder dickheads, full of Vangal, who just run around the plains of Lede
Right. And
doing bad things.
they're kind of
Um,
nomadic, right? They don't really have a city that they're
Totally
from.
nomadic. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, they're completely nomadic. And they're led by Galdor, the Deathless, who's
Galdor,
presumably
Galdor.
Galdor,
There he is.
who presumably can't die, um, with the Deathless as part of his title, or he can't easily die. And he looks, if he looks a little bit like Vangal, is a reason. Um, he's so Vangal has a herald, who's never named, but she's a Manticora, and which makes sense. Vangal made the Manticora, but he apparently took her on in a duel 1-on-1 and kicked her ass,
Right.
as the story goes. Um, so he humiliated Vangal's own herald. So he's pretty scary and badass. So he's one of the major NPCs you'll find in the Plains of Lede, and really up there. He's in the Wise and the Wicked, pretty badass NPC. So wait before you face his folks, but anyway, he leads multiple tribes of rampaging warlord horseback riders. And some of the vigilant vigils go out there and kind of keep an eye on his stuff and make sure he doesn't come too far south and make things difficult for the borders of Vesh. And of course, the orcs and True would be concerned about him.
Right.
And then there's also the Proud. I don't know if I asked you to get a picture of them.
I do have.
I joke that they're lion centaurs, but then you have to know what a centaur is, which not everybody on Skarn would necessarily know what a centaur is.
True.
But yeah, so head of a lion, mostly head of a lion, torso and upper arms of a human-looking, or at least humanoid, and then waist down would be a lion. A centaur, but lion body and lion head. They don't, and it's interesting because they don't really look like a manticora. You would think, oh, it's like a manticora, but with like an extra couple legs and butt.
Right.
But manticore don't have lion heads. They have cat-like features,
Right.
ears and eyes, but they don't have a full muzzle, and they don't have all the other lion features. So with more of a humanoid-looking nose. So these are, and I believe, I don't remember which Titan made them. I want to say Hrunruk. Pretty sure it's Hrunruk made these guys. And they basically predominate those northern areas, the Plains of Lede, and make life difficult for the orcs, and life difficult for anyone else trying to do anything out there. So, and they're pretty badass, and they're definitely Hrunruk because they follow Hrunruk, so they're one of his creations. And they're considered full-on Titan spawn, not a playable race. I don't know how broken a character you would be if you were playing one of these.
Yeah, they would have to, much like some of the other ones, especially ones that are coming out in Youngman's, like the Scrag, which are essentially sea
Yeah.
trolls. To be a playable character, they really have. They would be more broken than orcs. So
yeah, way
yeah,
more
super nerfed. If you
super
wanted to allow, I don't know if we've talked about this on air before, but third edition had a lot of the books had how to play this as a race because they had monster race options, and they would essentially say this is your level adjustment. So like a proud might be like a +3 or something. So essentially you're acting as though your character was a third level right off the bat without any classes whatsoever. And it was a really, to me, I'll say that to me, it was a really neat feature because it kind of tried to put into rules how to play a monster without having an entire monster book. If that makes sense.
Yeah. But although criticism with those that we ran into, because we tried playing monster races on multiple occasions, is that level adjustment usually was was too much.
Right.
So you do a +3 level adjustment before you could take any class levels, as if you were playing. It's like playing a centaur or playing some other kind of race like that. If you wanted to play a troll or a giant, and so you couldn't start taking class levels until level 3. And when you compared yourself, despite the fact that you had higher stats and more hit points, you found that you still weren't as powerful.
Right.
As
you lost all of that class ability.
Rogue.
That's why I said tried to do that, but
it wasn't actually balanced. I think it was too high of a cost. So you traded more hit points and better stats generally, and some kind of specific ability like I'm not trippable with I can sneak attack, which was actually a big deal, or I can cast spells.
You.
Yeah, and when you're 4th level, that's great, but when you're 10th level, it sucked.
Right.
It's like, well, the clerics are already casting undead, and I can hit things okay.
There was definitely that curve really that you just fell behind.
Yeah. But honestly, 3X had a lot of those curves were really, really broken.
Yeah.
Playing a 1st level wizard sucked, and playing a 20th level wizard was the best thing in the world.
Right.
And it's like,
I have to say that 5th edition, and again derailing here, but 5th edition is probably the first time that I've seen all of the high level characters can, not that they always do, but they can keep up with one another. We've done play tests that I totally expect the wizard to be the one on top because they were so powerful, and yet the fighter is just like
yeah.
3rd edition is not like that.
They literally number balanced it. They literally did a whole how much damage can you do at each level, and made sure that every class was about the same.
Yeah.
And
I mean, wizards still come out on top as long as their spells go off, but Meteor Swarm.
But your fighter still has to hit.
Right.
Meteor Swarm is terrifying.
I hate that spell as a DM.
That's why you have a bunch of little things, like when you have your big boss, surround him with a bunch of littles. So a bunch of mooks, so that your wizard can blow all their area of effects on the mooks.
Right.
Your fighters and guys go after the boss.
It's all about tactics.
That's how you balance it. Because if you just have one monster, they will pigpile on the one monster, and the one monster won't even get off the round. They just die in the first round.
I could do an entire episode on creature design theory, because after so much, I mean, I've essentially been playtesting monsters for 5th edition since like a month after 5th edition came out. It is, once you get into tier 4, their like CR ratings are just a joke.
Oh, dude, it's all a joke. Like, oh man, just my recommendation, whatever you do, just play test.
Right.
Do your best with CR, and then play test to get a sense of the feel, because you're never gonna know if your CR is right until you've actually thrown a party at it and see if any of them die. Anyway, I'm way
Yeah,
off.
sorry
So proud.
everybody.
Another race. Uh, and you can't play them, but you can play an orc. And we're back to the orcs. Okay. I can't think of
So,
anything
another
else I have to say
non-playable
about the orcs.
character creature is the Vangarok.
Oh yeah. You want to talk about? Oh yeah. Another thing that you find a lot in the plains of Lede, or the Vangarak, and one of the grid monsters. And I have used Vangarak many times. In fact,
I mean, they're just
I
pretty
will say
terrifying looking.
they show up in Vigilant.
Yay!
There's a great fight against a couple of Vangarak, kind of toward the middle of the book. A little way past the middle of the book. She literally looks it up and distracts herself by reading her novel. Yeah, I love the Vangarak. I think they're one of the real fun monsters, and they ravage all over the Plains of Lede, among other areas. And creature of Gorak, just like the orcs. No surprise. They are these ravenous. I don't even know how to describe it. They're like a cross between a snake, a maggot, and a insect.
Yeah, some kind of insect.
Quite a
Yeah.
scorpion, but like a well, not a scorpion, but a mantis.
Yeah.
With the claws. Just really weird, and they're large, so they're good 10 feet long, 10 to 15 feet long. They're 10 feet long. They're large, and they're constantly ravenous, and they have this what's really cool about the Vangarak is they have this funky ability where they can detect divine. So they have this radius, have things like, oh, I have blind sense radius or tremor sense radius and all these other things. Well, they have a couple of those, but they also have this ability where they can detect divine, so they can basically detect divine auras or other kind of things, because Gorak made them specifically for the war to fight the troops of the gods. So they can be like, that one's a cleric, I'ma kill him. And they have just an immediate hate on. And if you've got a cleric or a paladin in the party, or anything else that could be presumably divine in some way or determined to be definitely aligned with the gods,
right,
they will beeline it for them before anyone else. So so they're really fun to throw at your party and be like, they're gonna fight the cleric first. Good luck with that one. Good luck protecting them. Yeah, and I've used them before, and I don't want to say anything else without spoiling stuff.
I do have to say, so on the one hand, creatures of Garak, however you want to pronounce his name.
Garak.
To me, they're definitely scarier than fatlings. They both have that ravenous, they have that ravenous nature, but fatlings are more on the sloth end of things, whereas these guys are on the I'm gonna chase you until you fall down and I eat you.
Well, they literally have a pounce ability. Not I don't think it's called pounce, but they in the first round they can double move and attack. So they get a free dash early in the combat or something like that. So they are fast. They're stupid fast and ravenous and just mindless, because they're not that you could conceivably reason with a fatling. Maybe.
They're intelligent, so yeah.
Yeah, they're intelligent. You can't really reason with a Vangarak. They're single. So nope, my job is to kill the cleric or the paladin or whatever it is. Yeah, and I play with them because I'm a mean GM, and I count anything reasonably divine as counting. So if you're playing a race that was created by a god, or somebody that was got a boon or a blessing from a god, I would make that count. So if you were playing a sorcerer whose bloodline was a god, or if you're playing a warlock whose patron was a god,
right,
Vangarak's going to come after your ass. If you're playing a manticora or a triton, a race that was created by a god, Vangarak's going to come after you. But I'm maybe a meaner GM than well, meaner, or just want to make it interesting, I guess I'd say.
Yeah.
Because and maybe that widens the net a little bit, so they're not just coming after the cleric, unless your cleric is also a
manticora.
Manticora.
So nice. Any
which
other
and
last thoughts about orcs
uh,
and
they're fun to play, and you don't. Oh, and you don't have to be a barbarian
yeah,
or a fighter.
right,
That's the fun thing. And there's no negative like there was in 3X, where it's like, oh, and you have -2 to charisma, or whatever.
right,
You can play an orc paladin without being nerfed. You
yeah,
know, um, and you can play an orc sorcerer without being. Is it better to have that plus to charisma or whatever? Yeah, but at least you don't have a negative to it. So you
right,
can be an orc paladin or whatever race or whatever class. Or just gonna be a really extra strong and tough one.
yeah.
Is
In fact, it's really
basically
really easy
uh,
because when you take your stats and
yeah,
if you just take the base 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, 8, and you have a plus, is it +4 to strength?
something gross.
Right.
Yeah.
You can play a sorcerer and not and strength can be your dump stat and you're still not
And
negative.
you have a strength, then you're still not negative.
So,
Yeah, yeah. It's like
right. You're
I
maybe
spent no
not
points in strength, and
right,
I can
right.
carry my own equipment. Yeah. I don't need a bag of holding.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you can totally play. I mean, you'll be stuck with the 15. You won't get to that 16 at level 1,
Right.
but you can get it up pretty quick. So,
Yeah.
and generally
Yeah.
you're going to be at 20 by the time you're level 10 anyway. So, or level 8, I guess. If you put your next 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, well, 19, and yeah. It'll take a little bit longer, but
Yeah. And I don't really
yeah, it's
I'm not a
fun.
personal fan of min-maxing, so I don't tend to do that with most of my characters. If I'm playtesting, I do because I
I
know
am.
that's what's going to happen. But I really like not min-maxing. I like having weird combinations. And so orcs are great options to be like I don't have to
Yeah,
be that weakling.
yeah.
Anyway.
I'm totally a min-max player. I admit that completely. Mostly because most of my GMs, kind of not all my GMs, but I'm in a pretty tight community, and I think
Yeah.
6 of us GM. We rotate a lot. But most of my GMs, it's helpful. You're more likely to survive
Right,
their
right.
storylines if you
There is
min-max. Um,
there's definitely a cause or like an argument for min-maxing for sure.
yeah. And it's funny because my games generally it's less of a big deal to min-max when I'm running than when I'm playing in a lot of their games. Fran's games is like the exception. I don't have to min-max in her games, but because she's kind. but yeah, there you go. Anyway,
So Sarah,
that's it for me.
let's wrap up and you can tell us all about yourself.
Oh, Sarah Stewart, lore mistress of all things Scarlands, or at least a lot of the things Scarlands. And you can find me at morelikethisindustries.com. I am the co-author of Vigilant, Book 1 of Through Shadows and Dreams, Scarlands novel, which I love talking about, which has a half-orc paladin in it. Which has a gay half-orc paladin in it because that's what I do. And I also have a bunch of titles on DriveThruRPG that you can check out. Totally recommend it. And
I'm throwing up the link to those.
Yeah. And I'm in Travis Legg's Monday game as part of Plastic Cage Plays Myths and Matchmakers. So.
Nice. That's on Mondays. Crap, I forgot what time is it. 3?
3 Eastern?
Yeah.
It's noon Pacific, so
I'm in the show too, and I don't remember what time it is. Yay. And I'm Jeremy Hochhalter. I forget everything, apparently. I'm also in the show with Sarah there on Mondays. Plastic Age Plays here on Twitch. I also run some Scarred Lands, so at 4:30, is that right? 4:30 Eastern. Again, I'm forgetting everything today. 4:30 Eastern is Curiosity Cache, where we're playing in Shelzar, and essentially we started at level 0. It's fun. You can also find me on Twitter at WHPubs or Facebook WH Publications, or you can go to WHPublications.com. That's all I got for today.
And next time we might talk Slytherin?
I think
Maybe?
Slytherin's a good direction, or I mean, we'll just work our way down. You can talk
Work
about
our way around the
fashion,
continent,
yeah,
eventually. Yeah,
or
eventually we'll get to the places.
yeah,
But
we could do
yeah.
Morning Marsh's fashion Slytherin.
Morning March. I can do 2 hours on morning marshes, man. That should
Maybe we
probably be a
won't
bad
do.
thing.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, everyone, take care. Stay healthy. Stay safe, and we will see you next Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern.
11 p.m. Pacific. 11 a.m. Pacific. Sorry.
Stay safe, everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.